In 1970, the Boeing 747 took off and instantly changed what it meant to fly. It was bigger than anything the world had ever seen, carrying entire families across oceans at a price they could finally afford. For the first time, the planet felt within reach. But the same size that made it a legend would one day make it obsolete. This is the rise and fall of the Queen of the Skies, and after hearing her story, you might never look at flying the same way again.
In its gleaming white and blue livery, the 747 towered high above anything else on the aprons of one of the world's busiest international airports.
The gamble that nearly killed Boeing. The story begins in the 1960s when air travel was booming, but jets like the Boeing 707 and Douglas DC-8 carried only about 180 passengers. Pan Am's legendary CEO, Juan Trippe, believed the future demanded something bigger. He wanted an aircraft twice the size, one that could cut ticket prices in half and open international travel to the middle class. Boeing agreed, even though the company was already stretched thin with military contracts and its ambitious supersonic 2707 project. Still, they pushed forward. Building the 747 meant designing an entirely new airframe, wings larger than anything ever attempted, and engines powerful enough to make the impossible fly. Pratt & Whitney delivered with the JT9D, the world's first high-bypass turbofan. The scale of the project was staggering. Boeing built a new factory in Everett, Washington, a building so large it would remain the biggest in the world by volume. Engineers were nicknamed the Incredibles because the schedule seemed absurdly short. And here's the question: if the jumbo failed, could Boeing itself survive? When the first 747 rolled out in 1968 and flew in 1969, the gamble looked justified. Twice the size of its rivals, with 4 engines, a distinctive upper deck hump, and a fuselage longer than a city block, it could carry more than 350 passengers. Pan Am became the first to fly it, and suddenly the 747 was a cultural event. The jet that shrunk the planet. Before the 747, long-haul travel was slow, expensive, and exclusive. A ticket across the Atlantic often cost more than a month's wages, meaning only the wealthy could afford to fly. But the jumbo jet changed the equation overnight. By spreading costs across hundreds of passengers, airlines could finally sell tickets at prices the middle class could reach. In the early 1970s, a round-trip ticket from New York to London on a 747 could cost as little as $250, less than half the price just a decade earlier. For the first time, college students could backpack across Europe on a summer break, and families could book a real vacation abroad instead of dreaming about it. The impact was immediate. Tourism boomed. Hawaii saw record numbers of visitors. Europe became a rite of passage for students and backpackers, and international vacations became realistic family plans. In many ways, the 747 turned seeing the world from a dream into a possibility. Airports scrambled to catch up. Terminals expanded, runways lengthened, and jetways were redesigned just to handle the Queen of the Skies. For passengers, the experience was unforgettable. 2 aisles instead of 1. Lavish lounges and cocktail bars on early models, a spiral staircase leading to the mysterious upper deck. Flying was no longer just transportation, it was a spectacle. The 747 captured imaginations in films, music videos, and presidential arrivals. It made people wonder, if a machine this large could soar across oceans with ease, what limits were left for human travel? The oil shock. But revolutions come with cracks. In 1973, the OPEC oil crisis sent fuel prices skyrocketing.
If the Arab countries keep that pledge, it would reduce their production by almost 50% in 1 year. There were diplomatic maneuvers at the United Nations, in Washington, and in Cairo.
Overnight, ticket prices doubled. Airlines were suddenly flying giants they couldn't afford to keep in the air. Flights went out half empty. Fuel bills shredded balance sheets, and some carriers teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. What had been Boeing's triumph started to look like a curse. Airlines suddenly realized their new flagship had a problem: those 4 massive engines. The 747 guzzled fuel like no other jet. Many airlines struggled to fill 400 seats, and running half-empty jumbos on expensive fuel nearly bankrupted carriers. For Boeing, it was a moment of panic. The company had bet its future on a plane built for cheap energy and high demand, and the world had changed overnight. The 747 survived because demand eventually recovered, but the cracks that oil exposed would soon be pried open even wider by something else: technology. Twin jets take the throne. By the 1990s, the seeds of the 747's decline were planted. Advances in engine technology and certification rules allowed smaller planes with just two engines, known as twin jets, to fly long distances. The Boeing 777 and Airbus A330 could cross oceans under ETOPS rules, which gave twin-engine aircraft the same safety certification as four-engine jumbos. They were cheaper to operate, easier to fill, and more flexible. Airlines could connect smaller city pairs directly instead of funneling everyone through massive hubs. Passengers loved it. A non-stop flight from secondary cities was better than a stopover at a congested hub. Airlines loved it even more. Fewer empty seats, lower fuel bills. The 747 suddenly looked outdated. Why operate a massive four-engine jumbo when a twin jet could do the same trip more efficiently? The Airbus challenge. In the 2000s, Airbus decided to bet on a very different future. While Boeing was developing smaller, more efficient twin jets like the 777 and Dreamliner, Airbus launched the A380, a double-deck giant that could carry more than 500 passengers in standard layouts, and even up to 850 in all-economy seating. It was marketed as the ultimate answer to congestion at major airports. Airbus argued that global air travel would be dominated by mega-hubs such as Heathrow, JFK, and Dubai, where demand was so high that only massive aircraft could handle the traffic. For a brief period, it looked like the A380 might truly challenge the 747's throne. The aircraft was modern, quiet, and filled with possibilities for luxury. Emirates Airlines became its loudest supporter, turning Dubai into a global crossroads with an all-A380 fleet. Passengers loved the comfort and space, but airlines soon realized the economics did not hold. Filling more than 500 seats on every flight proved far more difficult than Airbus promised. Fuel costs were punishing, and flexibility mattered more than raw size. In the end, both the A380 and the 747 proved the same truth. Bigger wasn't always better. But while Airbus's gamble fizzled out, the 747 wasn't finished. Its size still held value, just not where most people expected. The 747's second life. As the Queen of the Skies faded from passenger service, she found a second career that kept her flying high. The very features that made the 747 expensive as an airliner made it invaluable as a freighter. Its enormous capacity and distinctive nose door, which swung open to load oversized cargo, allowed it to carry engines, construction equipment, and humanitarian aid in ways no other aircraft could match. Cargo operators like FedEx, UPS, and Atlas Air snapped up 747-400Fs and later the 7-4-7-8F, turning them into global workhorses that continue to circle the planet today. But cargo wasn't the only arena where the jumbo jet stayed relevant. The 747 became iconic in another role: Air Force One. For decades, the President of the United States has flown in a modified 747-200, a flying White House with secure communications, missile defenses, and even a small operating room. When the blue and white aircraft rolls onto a runway, it is not just a plane, but a projection of national power. The Queen of the Skies may have lost her passenger crown, but she proved she could adapt and remain indispensable. Why it couldn't last. The decline of the 747 came down to two hard truths: economics and physics. 4 engines burned far more fuel than 2, and airports had to stretch runways, expand gates, and buy specialized equipment just to handle the jumbo. Airlines also struggled to keep hundreds of seats filled as new routes and low-cost carriers reshaped travel. Passengers no longer wanted to funnel through giant hubs. They preferred non-stop point-to-point flights on smaller, more efficient jets. Airlines followed suit, chasing flexibility and lower costs instead of prestige. The very qualities that once made the 747 a marvel became the weight that pulled it down. Yet its story is not just one of decline, but of longevity. The first 747 entered service with Pan Am in 1970 and soon became the backbone of international travel, flown by giants from British Airways to Japan Airlines. By the 2000s, twin jets were taking over, but the Queen of the Skies endured. In 2023, Boeing delivered the final 747 to Atlas Air. More than 1,500 were built, and for over 50 years, generations grew up wide-eyed at the sight of her. No reign lasts forever, but few ever ruled so completely. So yes, the Boeing 747 changed air travel forever. It shrank continents, opened skies, and redefined what ordinary people thought possible. But revolutions don't last forever. Efficiency, economics, and time itself brought the Queen of the Skies back down to Earth. So tell me this, did you ever fly on a 747? What do you remember most? The staircase, the size, or simply the thrill of being on board? Share your memory in the comments. And if you want more journeys like this, make sure you're subscribed. We'll be back with more Stories from the Skies.